Hey everyone, Cosmos here from DolyGames. In this video we're going to be talking about the Thor skills, since lately somebody asked me about choosing the skills for Thor. So I thought to make a video about it and go over the skills that there are, the ones that I have chosen, and why, and which one to take, which one not to take, and so forth. Let's actually first start with the passive skills, and then I will do the active skills afterwards. So first up on the Thor, I also think it makes a big difference to understand which kind of Sylph purpose each Sylph has. And just for a second to open the Holy Sword, we have basically three paths for Sylphs. We have the Odin, we have the Frigga, and we have the Thor. For me, specifically, Odin, so you have the Thor, I see him as the damage Sylph, the one which has the highest damage output, but let's say the lowest survivability. And then you have the Frigga, who can heal and shield and so on, so it's maximum defense, let's call it like that, but very limited damage output. And then we have the Odin path, which is in the middle of Thor and Frigga, because damage, he can still do damage but not as much as Thor, and he can still heal and shield but not as much as Frigga. So why am I saying that is because for me Thor must be focused on maximizing damage output, and that's how I have selected my skills. So let's first, with that kind of introduction, let's go into his passive skills. There are two lines, and one above here and two below here. So which ones I have selected? Let's start with that. I've selected Blessed Fire, damage dealt increased by 15%, no questions asked, no chances, guaranteed. Then Blessed Wind, damage received decreased by 15%, so minus 15%. Again, no chances, no anything, it's a guaranteed figure every turn. And then the Unstable Voltage, which is a traditional, let's say, Thor skill. It's been his, let's say, signature, where he increases damage when he gets hit, and it stacks up to 10 layers, as it says. So each time is 5%, so times 10, 50% increase in damage. So especially when you're against many opponents, this can, really quickly add up. So those are the ones I have selected. Let's look at what else exists and what else I may have wanted or not. So first one here, Molten Might, increases damage dealt by 5% each attack for 5 turns, can stack 20 times. This is also an interesting damage increase skill. The trouble that I have with this is that you get it's sort of cumulative, so you'd have to accumulate before doing your big damage skills, like for example the Roaring Lion, which also makes you predictable because the enemy can see that you have this, can see that you are, let's say, adding up the percentages, waiting to cast your strong skills, and then he can put put a shield at the correct time. So that's, let's say, my criticism for the Molten Might. The other skills like the Blessed Fire, you will have your damage increase straight away, and you will have it every turn, not decreasing, not increasing, cannot be removed. So that's why I do not choose the Molten Might. Next is Lightning Splash, 20% chance to deal 100% base damage to an extra target when attacking. It's good, but I don't like it. The reason for that is this is for hitting something other than one enemy, and I see Thor as a 1 versus 1 type of a situation guy. I do have one AoE skill, AoE area skill, to deal with multiple enemies, but mostly he's there to dish out a massive amount of damage on a boss. So this is not falling in that spirit, and that's why I don't choose the Lightning Splash. Next is Blessed Electro, 10% chance to restore 20% of max HP when receiving damage. 20% of max HP is a very nice amount of healing, and if you get hit multiple times, of course the chance of this getting triggered is pretty good. But the question is, if you take this first, it goes against the Thor spirit, so it's not focused on damage output. And I would also argue that reducing damage by 15% is better than having a chance to heal 20%. So with that reasoning, I did not choose Blessed Electro. Then we have the Divine Wrath, chance to reduce enemies' awakening points. So 300 points, it used to be a big deal, now it's not a big deal anymore. And that goes together with the Divine Howl, chance to recover 300 awakening points when attacking. The Divine Howl is more useful in situations, also in PvE situations, because it helps you stay in Sylph mode longer. But generally speaking, I see Thor as I go from my hero mode into Sylph mode, do the massive damage output, and I get out of the Sylph and recharge it for the next run. So with that in mind, I did not choose the awakening points. Also now Dragon Chant is a lot more powerful when it comes to awakening points, rather than 300, which is a limited amount that's here. So that's to answer the Divine Wrath and the Divine Howl. Then we have the Blessed Water. So this is a better healing than the Blessed Electro. All the same 10% chance, but this one heals 30% of max HP. It says each turn, although it doesn't say for how many turns. I have not tested it, so I cannot confirm it. But the reasoning for me, it's exactly the same as the Blessed Electro, why I did not pick it. Although if you're going to take a healing skill, naturally 30% is better than 20%. The difference is this 30% is... sorry, I got confused here. So the 30% here is a chance on every turn that you play. And this 20% is when you are taking damage. In many situations, that's going to be exactly the same thing. However, if you are faced with multiple opponents, they will hit you multiple times, and therefore the chance of you healing 20% is a lot higher than the chance of you healing 30%. So with that reasoning, I would actually the Blessed Electro is better, but my point about healing still remains that Thor for me is supposed to be to maximize damage output. Healing does help you survive, but again, I prefer the damage reduction in this case rather than healing, although healing is nice as well. So if you like the healing, you might switch from damage reduction to healing, for example, to the 20% or the 30%. You might want, if you could sacrifice damage, let's say removing 15% damage to add more survivability and take the healings. But as I said, for me that goes against the Thor spirit. Then we have the Razor, 20% chance to increase awakening points by 150, and that falls for me in the same explanation category as the Divine Howl and Divine Wrath. So I won't say more since we covered the awakening points. And here is the Spirit Fire Mastery, chance to increase crit rate for 30% for the next 2 rounds. The reason I don't, this is actually good, but the reason I don't take it is, there are 2 reasons. One is there is only so much crit chance you can go until max, so having a massive amount of crit rate will not be beneficial. There is a limit. We try to have as much as possible, but not a detriment to everything else. And the second is predictability or unpredictability. So this is a chance. It might happen, it might not happen. And if it happens, perhaps you have already used your major attack skills, and then this happens, and then you have nothing good to use at that point. So for those 2 reasons, I did not select the Spirit Spirit Fire Mastery. Then we have Static Field, 20% chance to prevent enemy crit next round. Theoretically, this could be beneficial if it falls on a very strong skill of the enemy, but again has this problem of predictability. Although 20% chance means 1 in every 5 turns would remove a crit, but it could be a turn where the enemy doesn't crit anyways, so removing crit when he doesn't crit, that's also kind of a waste. So it has to have a perfect situation where he would have crit and he would have hit you with something really strong and you prevented the crit, thereby preventing the damage increase. So very difficult to plan for, to predict for, and that's why I did not choose Static Field. And last is Fire Smite, 10% chance to deal 20% damage next round. So first of all, 10% chance, that's 1 in every 10 rounds. That's, not frequent. 20% damage increase is of course very nice, and it goes on the next round. So one problem here is that you might not have a skill to use on the next round to take advantage of the 20%, and the 10% chance might make it trigger this skill at a time where it's not comfortable for you, and that's the reason why I did not choose this. So I went with the guaranteed damage increase, a guaranteed damage decrease, and this one is a pretty much guaranteed damage increase. From one attack it's 5%, which is not very much, but it adds up quite fast, and it can give even more damage increase than the 15%. So it goes up to 50%, but of course you need to get hit for this to work. So those are the passive skills. Now for the active skills. Let's first say what I have and why I have it, and then we can look at the others, because in the active skills, unlike the passive, there are some choices that I would love to have, but I don't have space for. So what I have is I have 3 Delphic skills, which have 45-second cooldowns, which means I probably will not use them the second time. So we have the Roaring Lion with the highest damage percentage, 570%, very nice. It hits one target and also makes the caster, so you receive more damage. So it's kind of going crazy and increasing the chance of yourself dying, but it's really a high amount of damage. The next is the Delphic Thunder Wave with 470%, so 100% less, but it's still a very, very healthy percentage, 470% damage. And the Delphic Deadly Kiss I'm using for area to manage multiple opponents, so this one will do less, 315%, which is still a high amount of damage, but it will hit all the enemies. So 3 Delphics, and I have a power up furthermore to be used if necessary before the Delphics to increase the damage further by 60% for 3 rounds. So a power up type of a thing. And for a faster cooldown, I have my Infernal Inflammation for 2 reasons. One is it has a 10-second cooldown, so I can use it almost every turn. Second is the damage that it does is a good amount, 270%. And the third reason, so there are 3 reasons. And the third reason is it further increases the damage to the target by 10% for 3 turns. So very nice skill. So you could start with this, then go with the Vulcan Blessing, 60%, so you'll have 10%, 60%, and then hit them with the Delphics. Works out really nice. So the way I have built my Thor is to get into Sylph mode, dish out a massive amount of damage, and to get out. Wait for it to recharge, repeat if necessary. So let's see what I'm missing that I would still like. This skill is very nice. I used to have it before. I gave it up. But it's nice. Jupiter's Wrath. The reason it's nice is because it prioritizes players, so it's not going to hit the Eudemon or anything like that. The willpower, it's going to hit the player. So the damage is nice, 275%, and it has a sort of an amnesia effect, blocking 2 random skills to the enemy. which I think was a bigger deal in the past. Now you can go in and out of modes and sort of not suffer too much from it, but it's still very annoying. If your Delphic gets blocked, you cannot use it, of course. So I still think it's a nice skill. The cooldown is high-ish, not as high as Delphic's 45 seconds, but high, 30 seconds. But still, it's not so high that you don't use it frequently. You can still use it every maybe third turn, something like that. Then Shock Chain is also a nice skill. Doesn't do too much damage, but it boosts the damage received by 15%. So it's kind of like a power up. I still prefer the Infernal Inflammation to it, because this one has a 10-second cooldown. Although here this one gives 15% damage increase, this one does 10%. So each one has its benefits. This one, although, is for 3 turns, while this one is for 2 turns. I think it's not a major problem if you pick one or the other. I personally prefer more Infernal Inflammation. Then we have the Consuming Flames, which is a very nice skill. It's kind of drains your opponent like a bleed. So it does damage itself, not so much, but the main point is that it bleeds the enemy for 3 turns. So the good thing about this is it has 10-second cooldown, and that it's a bleed based, not a direct damage based. I would love to use it, I don't have space for it. Then we have the Delphic Vulcan's Judgment. I also like this skill. Again, I would love to use it, I don't have space for it. The reason I like it is that it can hit up to 2 opponents, so not necessarily 1. You might get lucky and hit 2. It has the same Delphic cooldown of 45 seconds. The damage is lower though, 430%, but I prefer to have 470%, so more damage on one target, because the way I'm using my Thor is usually against one target, so I don't necessarily need that possible chance for hitting 2 targets. And that's the reason why I've taken, for example, the Thunder Wave over the Vulcan's Judgment. But it's a very solid skill. If you like it, it's no problem to use it, for example, instead of the Thunder Wave here. And that's it. That's all we have for the Thor active skills and Thor passive skills. My selection and all the reasonings why I choose something and why I don't. I do have 3 Thors. They are all, well, they should all mostly be using, or do I have 2 Thors? No, I have 2 Thors. I have 3 Odins, 2 Thors, and a bunch of other nonsense. So the 3 Odins I mostly use made for the time portal. The Thor I use for the damage increase for the player. So that's very nice. It has these skill increase character attack by 5%, yeah, if you want to increase your damage, you can use him. So, and that's what I do. I have Thor on my character as main to dish out maximum damage. I've given my best Sylph is my Odin, is my highest BR Sylph with the Holy Sword invested in it. I use this for a time portal for Holy Temple, but I've given it to my willpower as on my active daily Wartune playing. So the Thor here it's not even upgraded too much with the Holy Sword. A little bit. The BR is low, 511. My main Odin has 1.5 mil. And but I still use him as my main Sylph for my daily activities and boss killings. So that's that. I think I covered everything there is for the Thor. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please do click on like and subscribe if you did, and share with your friends so everybody can benefit from this information. And otherwise, remember my Wartune blog is at wartune.dolygames.com, and free-to-play games at DolyGames.com. All the links are in the description of the video as well. Thanks for watching and have a very nice day.